session for the Rutherford County School Board. First up on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Sharp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tonight we have Miss Irish Kennedy from Laverne Middle School. She's going to come up to the front and start our pledge. Miss Irish is an artist. She writes books. She's a member of the Beta Club, and she's in the theater, and she loves to sing. Welcome, Irish.
I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, I would like for us to take a moment of silence and remember Siegel's tennis coach who tragically passed away this week. Thank you. Next, we have the agenda. Take a look at the agenda. Comments or questions? Anything, Dr. Sullivan? Changed? Next, we have the consent agenda. Anything changed there? Okay.
Ms. Maxwell,
Yes.
I have a question probably for Trey. On G, the seat rate change request, could you just kind of explain that a little bit? I mean, I read through it. I'm just curious why they requested, I guess, less seats.
Their contract was for a larger bus, and they've replaced it with a newer bus that has a smaller number of seats.
Okay, just updating.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thursday, we will have the special performance from Homeward Pitter Campus School. Then we will have Rutherford Strong on Thursday and public comment. And tonight, we have our guest speakers, Mr. Rob Schwartz, who's going to present an update to our rezoning.
And while Rob is getting ready, just a reminder, the board last November passed new zoning maps. Those maps had a contingency that they would be voted upon again for a final vote at least 6 months before implementation. That allowed us the ability to go back and have new enrollment analysis, which shifted a little bit, and that's a little bit what Rob's going to talk about. And then elementary didn't have any changes from what was proposed last year. Middle does not either, because middle school is waiting on the new middle school to be approved before zoning goes in line. And then high school, we had some overcrowded schools that we had to shift some boundaries around, that we worked with our principals and our team and Rob's team. So that's kind of where we are. We do need these passed as soon as possible so that we can make sure we update for student enrollment that usually begins as soon as the school year starts for our high schools especially.
All right, good evening. Pleasure to be back here in Tennessee. It's not warmer than Kansas City, I'll tell you that. Just for reference for everyone, I'm going to take you on a little bit of a weave because you have to understand some of the components to the enrollment. So we'll get into some of the aspects of what this means with the changes that may come place with the high schools. There's expectations in this report. The full report will be available to you. I think you guys may have it to be able to look through. So we have 4 parts to this process. There's the enrollment demographics, there's development and growth trends, part 3 is the projections, and then part 4 is the next steps. That's where we're going to spend the most time tonight. Good news, if you like growth, we're still expecting you to grow. Right? So there you go.
Surprise.
Surprise, right? And it's at all levels, elementary, middle school, and high school. lots of building activity. In fact, when I got in here early this afternoon, I started driving around. There's a lot of really cool things still happening. You have lots of visuals that will help you have context of the district boundary, city limits, what the boundaries are for 24-25 school year for elementary, the middle school, the high school, and then what's proposed or what was been approved for the elementary boundaries in 25-26, the middle school boundary map for 26-27, and then the high school boundary map that we're going to come back because there's some areas that we potentially may want to be changing. You guys are going to talk about that tonight. Everything goes back to these planning areas where we're trying to understand what's happening with growth. So just know there's lots of geography. There's a lot of statistical analysis in this. That's what this page gets at. Understanding what's happening with the projections. I do want to take a moment because we have to talk about how good was the projections last year and why should you make decisions this year as we talk about high schools. So at the district level, we're 99.1% accurate. We start to drill into the elementary, missed that by 96 students, middle school students by 118, and then the high school was about 150 students. So pretty remarkable. And again, this goes back to the people in your community, right? We met with the cities, we toured the districts. There was a lot of good information that provides the insight into why we're able to accurately forecast what's happening in your district. Lots of insights. Really what I want you to take through is these next few slides are all important, but one of the things that we're planning for next year's analysis is everything's going to be rolled back to using October's count. As we started analyzing things, we had, depending on when we got the data, was it the mid-September? Were there things still being completed in that student data? And so it was closer to October. We think if we go back and do that at a stagnant date in October, we'll be even more accurate at the building level and at the grade levels. So,
Rob, can you start, because we grew, what, about 400 kids between September and October?
correct.
So-
And that was kind of the big thing there.
When they first did our analysis a couple weeks ago, we met with them and we're like, those numbers are way too low for the number of kids. And they had pulled a September data and we added about 400 between September and October.
Dr. Sullivan, were those ESL? The 400
All over
kids?
the place. No, a lot of it
All
was
over the
high
place,
school, too.
okay.
Yeah. And the other thing that we really want to hone in on is the Murfreesboro City Schools. That transition as they come into 5th, 6th, or 7th grade, depending on which building they're at and the choice those parents make, is a huge impact on how we're able to know those number of students. We've looked at live births.
I have a question.
You bet.
Murfreesboro City Schools, does it take into account that they are now, a lot of their elementary schools are doing away with the 6th grade class?
Correct.
So-
Correct. So we tried to factor in that we'll get more of those 6th
Okay.
graders rather than being 7th grade.
Okay, great, thank you.
You bet. The other thing that we've started to really hone in on is the live births. You're growing so fast that the live births are just going up. And that's a good thing for as we factor what the future kindergartners could be. There's other demographic trends if we were not growing that we'd actually be losing live births in most of the places that we work. So the growth is something that's allowing us to say kindergarten's going to keep accelerating in the amount of students we have 5 years later. This is in spite of demographic data that we know millennials and Gen Zs. If you go back to the Newsweek poll that came out, I think, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, the millennials and the Gen Zs are back-to-back generations that they, as a 40% group that don't have kids, saying they don't want to have kids. So this is something that we've been factoring in, that is, we see these subdivision life cycles. We know that whoever replaces is likely not to have maybe as many kids as what we saw when those homes were built even 10, 15 years ago. Again, just visuals for you to understand as we're really honing in on what that potential population is and how do we address that and know the number of kindergartners we have in future years. Next couple slides get at some of the data differences that we have between September and October, and with this growth change, it impacts our modeling. And so even though we've been really accurate, I think we can get even more accurate specifically as we start to look at like years 4 and 5. Again, cohort change, trying to understand where that growth is happening grade to grade, and the bulk of them are from the city schools coming in from 5th to 6th and 6th to 7th. So when you look at that column, a lot of kiddos that we didn't have in our system prior to that. Intra-district transfers, again, how are students moving
Can
around?
you go back to, if you don't mind?
You bet.
I think it's good to see the overall cohort student change. You see that there were a couple years of 20 to 22 where we were 3-4%, and it slowed, I hate to say slow, but it slowed to, what is that, 1.1?
1.1.
What is unique is that we're seeing the growth slow a little bit, but instead of being all at once, it's now taking more time throughout the school year. And so to where we used to see more students move in as the year changed, now we're seeing that just continual student migration.
And this is also a good point, Dr. Sullivan, on this, is when you look at these change totals, this is why we're saying that October date is going to be more important, because I do believe in that 23-24 school year, we grew more than 664, but when we're looking at the student data extract, the way in which it was extracted, all of a sudden it showed that we significantly declined in what that growth was. It was more than that, but that's how we tried to model with what we had with our student data. Inter-district transfers, this is just to give you a sense of there's already movement of students from building to building in spite of boundary changes. It's where programs are or are not, or people are moving throughout the county, and so this gives an understanding where they reside and then where they're attending as you go across that row. So quite a bit of movement that's already happening. Some of this could be our student options, grandfathering, all those different elements with all of the changes that we've been doing. You'll see the same thing at the middle school level, and as well at the high school level. So again, quite a bit of movement. This is not abnormal to any of the districts we work with. Migration is something we're looking at from a standpoint of who's new to the district or who's left the district. So I want you to think about this. This shows you 3 years at each of our grade bands of elementary, middle school, and high school. If all of those students that were here the previous year of the years being analyzed remained here, we really would be growing. That's the green portion of those bars. And so you can see at the elementary level, we've had more movement of students that left the district than what it was 3 years ago. It's been pretty stable out-migration at the middle school, and it's kind of stabilized at the high school. We look at the orange bar, those are kids that are new to the district the previous year, they weren't here, and so that's just growth. So we have 22% change in our enrollment just with migration. So it's a lot of movement. When we look at out-of-district students, these are the students coming into our district, and we can see which of those county schools that we're getting those students from, likely staff.
You go back one, I want to hit on just testing, because I think it's a good point. Go back one more. So we talk about student growth and why we focus on TVOS so much, and 22% of our kids were not ours the year before, and that is why we focus on growth so much, is that year over year, 20% of our kids weren't ours the year before.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty amazing with the academic growth kids get, right, with that changeover. It's huge. Out-of-district students, again, where are they from? Most of these are probably staff persons. I'm probably thinking they're probably almost all that. Other visuals to get at where that change is based on the geography. Green is a decrease, orange is an increase. The darker those oranges and greens are, the greater extent of that increase or decrease. They're all changing. This is just looking 5 years ago. This is the K-12 enrollment. What is it now? Where is our density? I really would want to just zoom into some of these, because at the county level, this looks like, wow, there's some kids here, but there's a lot of kids. If we zoomed into whether it's Smyrna or Laverne or Murfreesboro. Again, all these bullet points, you can read all this. It's just growth with things that we're seeing with your enrollment. We stepped into developments. One of our starting points is this visual to know who is the people that are moving into your community. So it's a total population from census, which is the blue line. Actually, excuse me, is the green line, so the bottom one. So it's growing, meaning there's more than 8,000 new persons each year with census estimates in the county. The blue line represents our building activity of certificate of occupancies. And so it's slowed a little bit when you see what it was from 3 years ago to what it's been the last couple years, but it's still quite remarkable of 2,500 to 3,500 units being built each year. The red line represents our enrollment change. What I want you to take away from this, people are moving here, but remember what I said about the millennials and Gen Zs? They're having fewer kids, so it's going to take even more housing product to be built to make similar yield rates of what we saw 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. Get more demographic information to understand elements of our population, housing, income, and workforce. Again, it's always changing. The yield rates that I mentioned to you, this gives you a perspective of the elementary level for K-5. What are we yielding for single-family product? And the bottom row represents that district average. When you see the orange shading, we're more than 5 from that district average. You can see what that is for each of these attendance areas, the current attendance areas. How is that playing out? Are they increasing? Are they decreasing? And how far are they from that district average? Quite remarkable, particularly if I go back and you see we've built 13,259 single-family units since 1819.
I have a question.
You bet.
Yeah, that one. Okay, explain the main takeaway, because it's saying that Stewart's Creek limited yield decreased the most by -5. Well, that's hard to believe, because when you drive out over, I forget what road it is, but there's one particular road, like Van Buren, where it connects to Blackman Road and Almaville, all that. Like, I remember that used to be nothing but fields. Now it's houses everywhere. There's about 8 subdivisions that are new.
That's where we've capped enrollment. So then,
Right, but it says -5. so
because those
that's
new
huge,
students,
district average.
those new students aren't moving in because we've capped them. They can't go to that school anymore. Sorry, they can't go to that school right now. So it's showing
So
as
it's
a
showing in
negative.
other areas.
Yeah, Stewartsboro probably has the big jump, I would guess.
Okay, because I was like, there's no way it could be -5.
Well, and actually I'm going a different direction. What that column is telling you, 7 years ago, it's 5 students fewer for every 100 units than it was 7 years ago. So if you look at that row and you go back to 1819, in Stewart's Creek, we were getting 28 K-5 students for every 100 single-family units. Here this year, it dropped to 23. And so we're yielding fewer kids in that single-family product than what we were 7 years ago.
And that doesn't take into the cap that we put in that school.
No, this
That's just who could be potentially be zoned in the area within that pocket of subdivisions.
Within our system. So there's more kids there that would be choosing potentially other options, homeschool, Murfreesboro City Schools, parochial, homeschool. But this is from our students that we have being served. Do they reside in that particular boundary, and are they in a development that we're factoring in as single family?
That's hard to believe that's negative.
Well, it's not negative, it's just reduced by 5 from what it was 7 years ago.
Yeah, but exactly. It's just hard to believe that it's reduced, because it seems like it's growing. It just, looking at what you see in your visually, it's hard to
Take
see
that.
the data. That's all. That's
It is, and here's one of the funny things about numbers is as we have developments get built and we experience those kids, we likely never yield as many kids as we did when those units were being built. So when you start to look at some of the maps later where we're looking at the age of the product, the value of the product, those things are impacting what we potentially see for these yield rates. So again, the data, the visual is like, hey, something's happening,
right.
but it's not
the
showing.
data is not jiving. It's just interesting. Okay.
You bet. If we look at multifamily, the same situation of what we're seeing for yield rate with multifamily products. So this is going to include duplexes, townhomes, apartments, mobile homes, all of those things that are not single family. And you can see what's been happening in each of these zones. Specifically, if we look at Stewartsboro, in the first 2 years of this table, we didn't have any product that we were getting kids from. And then all of a sudden, those products were built, and we started to yield kids. So again,
These are, the subdivisions are being built, right?
correct.
Okay, 'cause
Apartment complexes, duplexes, for sure.
Let me ask you a question. How far back do you have data?
We have student data, I think, for sure to 1819. I have to go back, and Thursday I can provide you guys an answer on that, specifically for student data. For the county data sets,
Yes.
we can go back a long way with the data sets.
Give us a snapshot if you can. Not a lot of trouble, just a snapshot. 20 years ago, 25 years ago.
As far as what,
Permits, houses, that kind of thing.
let me get back to you, 'cause if I say something.
That's
yeah,
what I was
yeah,
going to say.
yeah, yeah.
See what you've got. I'm
You
just
bet.
curious.
You bet. I can provide that at our Thursday meeting.
Thank you.
You bet. It's a good question.
That kind of shows what Dr. Sullivan, I think, was alluding to, is the cap. You see all that transfer over to Stewartsboro
He's saying no.
versus Stewart's Creek Elementary.
He's
Is
saying.
that right?
No, he's saying the opposite. He's saying that had nothing, right, you're saying that has nothing to do with it. It's actually the subdivisions that are being built of the potential of students that can come to our system.
Well, not potential, the students that we are serving that would be in those subdivisions,
in
in
those-
that attendance area. There's more kiddos there that just aren't being served in our system.
In our system.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
you bet. So here's, again, visual of like the average year built. Again, when you zoom in, you can really get a sense of where things have been built. The legend starts at 1990, that's the light blue. Again, all this is aggregated to those planning areas that we look at. And then as we get to the red, it's after 2020. This, again, we're zoomed out. There's a lot of red when you zoom in a little bit tighter. We also look at those median home values. So this is from the county assessor data. You may be able to sell your house for more than what the assessed value is, right? You may not want to sell it for more when you're paying your taxes. But this gives us a sense of how we extract this back to being able to say what yield rate of kiddos do we get. And it's different with the age of product and the value. This map shows the smattering of units throughout the county. So these dots go back over the last 5 years. Just another way of taking that tabular data and showing you where we're seeing this. Again, it's the county view, so it looks like just someone played darts on it, right? Better than others. The development over time, this visual provides that context by decade. So the start of the decade is the blue portions of the column. What was built in that decade is the green, except for the last column. This is only really 3 years of data, and we've already built 17,627 units in 3 years of data. We're posed to be at least what we were in the 2000 decade. So think about that. That's quite remarkable with the developments. With the meetings we've had with the cities, the tours our team has had throughout the county, this map has changed a little bit, but the green areas are where we're seeing current activity. Yellow is potentially within the next 5 years, and then purple out towards 10 years. This is really just to help our modeling know what in the world could we expect. And so when you're making decisions on boundaries that we're taking into account, there's these new developments, and it's the latest, greatest, best information we can provide you.
And something I'd point out, when we first started talking about the new potential spot for a high school, it wasn't necessarily in the best spot that RSP would have recommended, and now you can see it sits almost where most of that growth is. And so,
For sure.
worked a lot better than we had anticipated last year, right?
It is. Once we get the land, right? It's always. Then what we've provided you is the potential units by the high school attendance zones. So you get a sense of when we're talking about boundaries, where are most of these developments going to be? And can we start leveraging this in some of our decision making once we finally can have the right building inventory for the students we need to serve? And so the greatest amount of developments is in the Riverdale High School attendance boundary and Stewart's Creek areas, right? So no surprise. And why do we need to have this next high school sooner than later? It's really shown on this visual. Again, we want to showcase there's economic development opportunities that continue to happen that are driving the development, driving families to move here. And so this is just a snapshot of some of the things that potentially are available in the conversations that we've been having with the cities. And more development things, you can read all these bullet points, pretty cool things that are saying it's going to grow. Development is poised to continue. So if we get into our projections, a couple things that we wanted you to really start to understand is how we've been looking at growth. And the red columns represents the kindergartners that we have, and the blue parts of the column represents our senior class in that year. And so we naturally, the senior class is greater than the kindergarten class. Well, one of the things that we want to add into this for all of the years, and you can see we just have the city schools through 22-23. When we add in those kindergarten numbers in there, this will give us a true perspective of what our growth is from kindergarten to our senior classes. And so in our model, we're offsetting that. On the bottom table, this is giving you what the average number of students are for each of the grade bands. So the red is the elementary, the blue is the middle school, and the green is the high school. That purple line is the aggregate of all three of those. So this gives us a sense of when we cross over 26, 27, there's going to be more high schoolers than there is middle schoolers. Now I know there's 4 grades to 3 grades, right? So there's an element of that, but this is showing that the capacity of all the kids that are in the elementary and the middle school, as they're moving into our high school, this is why we're running into our high school challenges. So again, just another data to give the county of this is why we need this. As we get into the projections, this visual you've seen the last couple years, red representing the elementary, the blue the middle school, the green the high school, and that purple line the aggregates of all 3 of those. And so we're tracking towards 54,000 students when we get out to 29-30. So very robust growth.
And that doesn't include pre-K, which is about 800 kids for us. So those numbers are about 800 less than what you guys are used to seeing.
Yeah. Again, all of these notes here I've mentioned in some capacity, but when you get into the building level projections, this will help you understand what you're seeing in these. I'll briefly explain what you see in each of these tables. You have each of the buildings listed. You then have the district capacity for those buildings. Remember, we did that study here about 2 years ago. Then as you move to the right, you see the enrollment for the past year's 3 ways. The middle row green font is reside. So are they in that attendance zone for those grades that are being served? What number of kids would that be? The bottom row blue font is attend based on that student data. Where are they actually going to school? The top row purple font is a subset of reside. Do they reside and actually attend there? So this shows you that whole movement of where they reside and how they're getting to the building that they actually are attending. There's a lot of reasons for this that could be beyond the student options grandfathering. It could be programming. It could be dual addresses between the 2 guardians, and one address was chosen and they're at the other building. Where you see shading, this is where we are exceeding the capacity of the building based on whether it's the reside or attend. If it's green, we have less than 70% utilization. So we have some buildings where that is happening, but you can see what that may mean as we look over the next 5 years with opportunities to do a few tweaks to maybe make them more efficient if they're underutilized or if they're overutilized, to be planning on how to move some of those kids to other buildings. When we go to the future projections for the next 5 years, we're showing you that with reside and attend. You'll see this with each of the buildings. So, yeah, lots of different things happening. Even with the middle school boundaries, again, we show that there's, for the attend, for the most part, we're fine at the attend with the way students are moving out. When I say fine, we're using all of those buildings, right? We're using spaces that maybe are not ideal for the way we're using those spaces. Things are happening, for sure, in those buildings in a positive way.
And while Rob's got that one, that is something we'll have to address next year. And hopefully when we get our new middle school, we'll have to go back and look at some of these zone lines. We have some of them based on the new projections that are too big with a new building sitting there. So that's something we'll have to look at. What I liked on the elementary side was that just about all of the orange shading went away, to where right now we're showing overcrowded, and it all pretty much goes away except for a couple spots that we can look at as time goes on.
High school, we'll stop here for a moment because this is going to start to segue us into what are we going to talk about here tonight to position what the district needs to be planning for. So when we look at our existing situation of buildings, you can see Oakland is high above its capacity starting next year of that 2,500 capacity in both the reside and the attend. That's one of our first landing points. When we look at Siegel, we're above it in both the reside and the attend. So those were two big sticking points with the conversation where you all said 6 months before the next school year, let's revisit and see is there some other potential changes that we may need to make beyond the way we were thinking about boundaries. Remember, we had some different criteria, some different measurements. We're hitting what those measurements are, but now as we're looking going in 6 months before this is to take place, maybe there's some different changes that we'll talk about.
There's a couple I wanted to highlight. The main one being Riverdale High School. So we're looking at the attend, and you'll see with these new projections, it's down below 1,800 with a high school addition of 2,500, but Rockville High is way over. And so that is why the new proposal has shifting one area very close to Riverdale back. And then the other portion was Oakland High School was way over. 2949 by 2930, and so shifting some of that downtown area, we rezoned everyone. Again, I met with all high school principals multiple times and went through different iterations of that and worked with some other entities in our county to make sure that those were split fairly. And so that's what you're going to see is some of this.
Dr. Sullivan, this does include, these projections include the additions, though.
Correct, yes.
For the capacities, yep, you bet. This goes back to what those columns were in the other visual, if you like tables. So again, the conclusion is just we're increasing, right? And so here we are, it's December 2024. What are our next steps? And so some of this started to get into this high school zoning conversation. So if you go back to 22-23 in that blue outlined box, these were the criteria that we were focused on. So projected enrollment, building utilization, so having the right kids with the capacity of the buildings, trying to have the boundaries last as long as possible, taking neighborhoods, whether you're a single family, a duplex, apartment complex, moving them into a exclusive building, whether it's the elementary, middle school, or high school, demographic considerations to try to have some balancing out, a lot of conversation about the city area even in 22-23, and then trying to move towards having some sort of feeder system that when I start elementary I'm going to this middle school and this high school. Our challenge has been we just don't have all of the buildings online to be able to start really planning for that. So those are going to be some things over the next 3 to 4 years that we can start really making sure certain parts of the district we might be able to have that happen. But that's what we were thinking back in 22-23. And so that orange outline box saying, hey, there's more work that we can do per what I've said and what Dr. Sullivan was saying on some of these buildings. Hey, if we make some of these changes now, we should be in a better position for these kids to have the right capacity, the right programming in those buildings. So our reasons to make these adjustments, recommendations to you tonight, are listed in the bullet points to the left. And so the first is the reexamination of the boundaries as requested by the board. Again, trying to balance the ever-balancing area of the city of Murfreesboro, having it in more of the buildings, right? That's been something we talked about in 22-23. We're still having that conversation and always will, right? Wanting to better balance the enrollment specifically at Oakland and Rockville were two of the buildings, and then minimizing some of the student impact that we see with Siegel and Blackman with the dual zone, right? So lots of different things that are happening. So what we're showing you here is a table that takes what the approved zones were for those boundaries, and then to the right, we're showing what I'm going to put up here in the next slide, what this potentially will look like with what we're calling an administration proposed zone adjustments. And so it does a better job of getting some of these students out of some of the buildings where there's too many. It still is not accomplishing. When we look at that bottom high school total, we have 19,105 capacity, and look, by 27, 28, we're over that, and we're over 20,000 by the time we get to 29, 30. So we still need the next high school. These changes are to demonstrate we're better utilizing the buildings and not letting some of the buildings get over their capacity.
Can I point out, those numbers are reside, those are not attend. So that's how many
Correct.
people actually live in the zone, so it should be less than those actual numbers in just about every case.
Correct. And then the other thing that once we see what all of this could translate into, going back, looking at any of the exceptions, grandfathering, student options, how does that start to matriculate through? Looking at some of the other things, let's say your special education, and some of the other specialized programming that are in buildings and not in other buildings, how does this maybe impact what we see here? This is reside, so very, very good point. So when we look at this visual here, this is what...
Rob, hold on one second. Yeah.
Sorry. What's the current capacity at Laverne? Because I'm assuming is the 2,500 after that addition?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So what's the current capacity?
22,021.
Okay. So it's, as of next year, it's right at capacity already before that addition.
Yes.
It's not shaded as if it is, but it technically is.
Correct,
That
it would be,
addition won't be
yes.
in place currently?
Yes.
Okay.
One thing I think I would want to update this is we would put the current capacity and then the year that the capacity to address that, because you're right, we don't quite have the right capacity for some places where the additions are occurring. Very good point. So if we go to, this is what had been approved. The colors being represented here, that light blue is Blackman, the more royal blue, purplish color is Siegel. Oakland is the yellow. Towards the bottom, that lighter green is Riverdale, and then that pink color is Rockville. So those were the core areas that we've been looking at with what this could mean as we drill into trying to make some of these changes. Then what's being proposed as some of these changes are shown on this map. So there's kind of some pieces here that if we look at for Rockville, does it show up there? Oh yeah, it does. All right, so if we look at Old Fork Parkway, sitting here, in this piece with 24, so we have this little island piece. One of the things we looked at is could we have it contiguous to Rockville, getting the right number of kids to make this balance. This piece makes a lot more sense than if we were to try to do something different. So that's one of the changes. When we look over in this eastern portion, we have some areas that if I pulled up, let's say our previous map to 22, 23, we start to see some things are maybe going back to where we had them in 22, 23. So we have some areas over here that are shifting to Siegel, and then we have another area that's shifting to Blackman, and then we created this other area that we're designating as a dual zone between Blackman and Siegel up here that's north of 840.
Into that zone, our proposal is to only provide transportation to Siegel. But it does sit right in the area that will be overcrowded with Blackman, hopefully, that can be relieved with our new high school.
If we go to, I want to stop right here and just get some impressions, maybe some questions of what you all see here and what it visually represents, and then if we come back to what this means with numbers as it would relate to the reside.
I appreciate you tweaking the downtown area, and I think you've done a really good job there.
With these changes, I'm just curious, if we end up being able to put a new high school in the north end, how much of what we are about to change do you anticipate having to, not for the new high school necessarily, but is that going to push anyone that was just moved to have to move again, with the exception if it was for the new high school? Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm asking?
For me, that was part of the reason to do the dual zone between Blackman and Siegel, is that's the area I think that could make sense to go to either Stewart's Creek or the new high school, depending where those areas. The rest of them should stay pretty consistent depending on what happens with Blackman west towards 840. I could see Stewart's Creek taking a little bit more of that portion, but those are the downtown south part, like from 840 south, I don't necessarily worry about that part having to change.
Okay, and forgive me because I'm not from Murfreesboro, I'm from the north end. So can you just explain to me a little bit more about that Riverdale and Rockvale section where that Rockvale portion is completely on the other side of a Riverdale portion?
Yeah. Demographic, trying to keep demographics similar between our high schools. And so that is the Cason Lane over to I-24, and then you have more of a downtown Murfreesboro section to where we tried to break all of downtown up for demographic reasons between all 5 of our Murfreesboro schools.
And one of the things, if I go back to 22, 23, we talked about the area of Blackman that comes south. It looks like it's a finger. If you look at what we have here, it's almost like multiple fingers are interlacing, right? So if you think about this, it's like everybody's getting some sort of a portion of an area that can balance out what you could potentially see in each of those buildings. So it's kind of quite remarkable to have something like this and what that may mean.
Dr. Anthony has a question. Oh,
Right, I was like,
the question, okay.
One thing that I was going to slightly interject, if you look at 2930, that would be the best case scenario for opening a high school.
yep.
So you're looking at your high school probably opening the year after that. So if you're thinking about when would someone move, and I realize you've got 1, 2, 3, you got basically 5 years in theory if we got the high school right after the middle school, if it was funded, before that high school would open. So you would, to your point, move in again, and I realize 5 years.
I'm shooting for 28, 29, so.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but
That's where, yeah, that's why I've communicated with the commission.
it's 2 years to build it. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there for, it's not like we're going to, and rezoning is never fun. I don't know how many I've sat through now, but it's never fun. But if it's 5 years, most of your students that have been zoned have had the opportunity to go all the way through, which is not something we've been able to do in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ms. Sharp?
So, thank you. So, Rob, can you go to where it shows, this one is the high school boundary map, 2526?
Current or the proposed?
Yeah, the current.
Oh, you want to go?
Yeah, this one here. This one here.
Is this one good, or do you want me to go all the way up to the beginning?
It doesn't go all the way up to the north end. What I'm trying to show is Laverne and Stewart's Creek.
You bet.
This says page 13. Yes, that one. So the problem, like Ms. Rosales says, going in those areas, the Stewart Creek is sort of pink. and the Laverne is sort of that chartreuse color green. We really need a high school in the middle of 24 Murfreesboro Road. But we also need another high school in the Stewart's Creek area, because that west side that butts up to Williamson County, there's so much land there. The developers are already moving in there. You can see them when you drive through those neighborhoods. They're so far away kind of from the main drag, but there's so much land back there. We really need another high school in that area. So we need 2 high schools on the north end, in addition to the annex that we're putting. Because that area is huge. If you haven't driven through there, it's scary. All the land that's over there and that the developers are coming in.
addition to what is happening out in Christiana
Right,
and in the
right.
Riverdale area, so we could do 3 high schools.
Yes, so the people from Williamson County are now moving toward the, they're moving out toward the edge. So as they move out toward the edge, it's going to bring a lot more industry, because there's a Publix that's coming just right outside of Rutherford County, and that area is growing. So we're going to have 2 school zones right there together, but it's still going to bring a whole lot of people to that general area. And I don't know what we're going to do, because we need 2 more high schools on the north end, in addition to the addition that we're putting up there.
I think you're right.
Because that area is so huge, it's just huge. I don't know how many acres that is and what that is concerned, but that area is huge.
It's like she's in our head every time we've been talking is where can we get lands, and there's just very limited areas when we.
Well, and the problem is there's land out there, and the developers can build on land that we can't.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
For sure.
They scoop it up before we can get to it as well. Yes, Mr. Tidwell.
Rob, I got a question. If you can go back to the projected numbers, in those projections, the board had voted on grandfathering in students. Is that accounted for in your projected numbers?
It would be in our attend numbers for the projections, not
The obviously not the reside.
Let me go down there.
And from our experience, it is somewhat of a guessing game to see who actually takes it and who doesn't. Like right now, we just finished the grandfathering from Rockville back to Riverdale. And so we'll have staff in both places to be able to serve students where they are.
Any other questions?
So I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Frost.
Are these all the changes that are recommended? Is it just that? Is there a reason why we have to wait till the rezoning meeting on next week? Can we vote on this on Thursday? Instead of waiting to have a special call meeting?
What do y'all think?
I mean, I don't know how many of them will, but I think it would be respectful to give parents time and opportunity to digest it and come speak, or email or whatever the case may be to let us know about it, but. Because we're just getting this information, they're just hearing this information. Not everybody even watches the meetings the day they happen because of work and after-school activity schedules and stuff like that, so. And I know myself, I have heard from some constituents, and I expressed to them to come to the rezoning meeting and to speak at that meeting and to be prepared for that meeting. So I think it's kind of late in the game to pull it.
Rob, so the majority of the changes are happening downtown Murfreesboro. I mean, it's spread out a little bit further than that, but that's where the majority of the cuts are happening.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where the majority of it is, yeah. We are going to discuss this Thursday as well.
And so if you have questions, Rob will be here again. He is staying through Thursday, so if you have questions over the next couple days, he will be here Thursday.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
I think it's a good decision to hire these people to do this. I think it's really a thorough job.
Done a very thorough job. Thank you, sir. Next, we move to legal.
So first, we have the annual policy manual review. And so we talked about this last time. TSBA's Board of Distinction Program recognizes school boards for their work. School boards seek this designation must meet specified requirements in 4 key areas: planning, policy, promotion, and board development. One of the requirements is annual review and maintenance of the entire policy manual. I'd like to recommend we start with probably 5. You all right with us to start with 5, Monica, or which one would you like for us to start with? I think section 4. 4, okay. Okay. So if you have any policies that you would like to send to our policy committee in January, of course you can send any, but our highlight is going to be section 4 for this meeting that we can discuss.
Okay, number 2, transfer student.
Board has been requested to admit a transfer student from another school system under discipline. The student was remanded for fighting and repeated violations and misbehaviors. According to policy 6.318, the board may deny admissions of any student except those in state custody when a student transfers from another school system under suspension or expulsion. Director of Schools recommendations to deny, and the board has the manila folder with them. And then the second one, board again has been requested to admit a transfer student from another school system under discipline. Students expelled for possession of a loaded firearm. Director of Schools' recommendation is to deny in this case as well.
Next, on number 4, we have policy adoption.
I think the last couple times we've done policy adoptions on the second reading, we have done these individually. Is that what the board would like to do with this one as well?
I'll take any. Would y'all like to lump them together, or would you like me to take them out separately?
I think you had some last
were
time
mixed
that were
votes.
mixed votes, so I'd probably leave them.
Okay. Yeah, I was
I'll read 'em.
planning on doing them individually, but
Perfect.
Mr. Vaught, were you wanting to, with the stretching hands? Okay, it's okay. Make sure. It's okay. So we will do that on Thursday. Number 11.
Financial matters. This amendment's to increase the general purpose fund 141 budgeted revenues and expenditures in the amount of $980,385 to recognize the awarded state special education pre-K grant for fiscal year 24-25 and fiscal year 23-24 carryover amount. Funds we use for additional education assistant positions to assist in pre-K classrooms, additional training for teachers and EAs, sensory and de-escalation items, and supplies materials for IPK classrooms. This grant will ensure that all students will have access to highly trained teachers and staff to meet their educational needs. This is a recurring grant and requires no local match. Number 12 is convenience center request, county public works request. So this was the official request from County Public Works Committee as requested to undertake certain studies on a portion of property at Laverne Lake Elementary between LaSalle and Gingham Road to determine if it's suitable for a future convenience center site. And that came to me from Public Works to put on the agenda.
Okay. 13.
Ms. Ashmore?
Yes, Mr.
Okay,
Zhao.
so this convenience center, it started, where was this originally located at? The convenience center? Was there a convenience center there before?
I think there was
It's right down the road, pretty much. It's on Sand Hill Road in Laverne.
In Laverne? So why do they need a new convenience center in Laverne?
Dr. Sullivan, you all right if I?
Yeah, this is the one we talked about.
So the county has been leasing land from the city of Laverne
From the city of Laverne?
for the convenience center. The city has decided they're no longer going to renew the lease because they have had issues with the traffic backing up. They've had some collisions on that road. They're going to do something else with the land for the city. So they let the county know that they will not be renewing the lease and that they needed to find somewhere else to locate the convenience center.
So did the city offer a separate location to put this convenience center? Laverne? They did?
My understanding is that the city does not own land that they feel is a fit for that. They did, I believe the mayor gave some recommendations of some other land to the county that they could look into. I don't know what all of that looked like. I don't know how far anything got looked into, and I don't know who brought up the Laverne Lake property, but I think that's about as much as I know, unless Mr. Lee knows any more than I do.
Okay.
That's pretty much it in a nutshell. The big problem for the city is the traffic. That's their problem. The city has outgrown that location. It's a huge traffic location. The city
Yeah.
doesn't own land.
Sure.
And the county would like to keep a convenience center on that end of the county for the citizens on that end, and they landed here.
Right, but the city had the issue because of the traffic, and that's where it all started, right?
And part of the problem, if I may, since I live up there, it's in there's a 90-degree turn, and traffic does back up because they have been not open when there should be opening. I mean, it's on Facebook. It's not a secret that they close when there's people in line. They open, they're closed when there should be open. So there's some other issues along with the property and the management of that location. And, you know, y'all know how I feel about it. This is not our job to settle. Where I see that Laverne does need a convenience center, but I don't think it needs to be on our property with our kids, our Title I kids.
Okay. Ms. Rosales, just so you know, it's a 2-lane road, and I was told they've had some head-on collisions there from people trying to go around the traffic. So that's one of the reasons why. It's not just the backup of the traffic, like out into another street, but it's the fact that there's nowhere for anyone to get by it or pass it.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Is this location, I mean, is it going to eliminate some of these problems, or is it just going to transfer the problems?
My understanding is where they're planning on opening up the land would give it more in and out. I'm not a traffic expert, so I couldn't tell you. I know there is property right off of Old Nashville Highway in Sam Ridley that is on the Laverne side that is for sale that I would hope somebody would look into. There's another piece of property I know Mayor Cole had told them about. I don't know if that's been looked into. As well as another piece of property right down from ACAR, I believe. Back on that industrial road, if you keep going behind the McDonald's and stuff back there. So I think there are some potential other options. I would be curious to find out if those have been looked into. I think you guys all know from past conversations, I am not a fan of this. I view part of my job as a board member is to make decisions based on what's best for the kids. And I can't see a single reason why putting a convenience center next to our elementary school is in the best interest of our students.
There is another piece of property that the city of Laverne has purchased on the Rock Springs side where the ridge is going in there, and they're going to put some retail in there. So it's in someone's neighborhood who's on staff, then there's one way into the neighborhood, and what they're trying to do is connect the bottom part of the neighborhood. And they're going to put retail and things like that, so there'll be 2 ingresses and egresses in and out of that neighborhood. And I really don't know why they couldn't put it in that. It's going to be zone commercial. And it'll be on the west side of the interstate. So there's plenty of other locations for them to look at.
But it seems it all started because there was a problem with the city having the convenience center there. So that's what started the whole domino effect. I wasn't part of the conversations, I don't know, but it's just interesting to me since it served the citizens of Laverne.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would just like to say as a board what was said directly to me by a commissioner, it was only one commissioner, so I'm not saying this is the opinion of the whole commission, was that, well, from now on, maybe we'll just plan a convenience center every time we buy land for a school. I am concerned about what precedents this could be setting. I do not want to be known as the county that puts convenience centers, dumps, whatever you want to call them, next to the places where our children attend school. I don't want to be known as the county that's bringing unnecessary extra people and strangers close to our schools for no reason. So I just think it's important that y'all know that, because there are things to think about moving forward too, and what kind of precedents we're setting when we allow things to be built on our properties as well.
Ms. Maxwell?
Yes, Mr. Zales.
So were these things shared at the Public Works meeting? Because they had a meeting back on November 7th. Was these concerns brought to them there? Because that's where, these concerns should have been brought to them at that meeting. And even Commissioner Anthony spoke about for us to bring our concerns, whatever concerns we have, to bring them at that meeting. So was this shared at the November 7th in the meeting at the Public Works?
I have shared what I have just said to you with Commissioner Johnson.
Right, but he's also told us, when he was here, Commissioner, with all due respect, he was here back in 2 or 3 weeks ago, I don't even remember when, but he told us, each board member, that whatever concerns we have, to bring it up before Public Works and share those.
I believe the
and speak
meeting
out.
that he invited us to happened over fall break.
It doesn't matter whether it happens in fall break.
You're asking if I brought it there, and I'm telling
I'm
you
not
I did it
asking
because
you,
I
I'm
wasn't
just
here.
saying, did any one of us did? Because it's fine, I mean, that's fine that you're bringing it to us, but they were very specific about us going to Public Works and share whatever concerns we have to the Public Works. So that, because they're the ones who are making this decision.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, this is the first official public request. All of this stuff has been talked about behind the scenes. This is the first time that we, as a school board, have spoken about this. Yes, Commissioner Anthony Johnson came here and spoke about it, but it has not been on the agenda. This is the first time it has been an agenda item. So we need to have time for our people and our constituents to talk about it. And that was the whole thing. I believe Ms. Darby spoke to Commissioner Johnson about it being during fall break, and they would not change the meeting. So that's kind of a moot point, in my opinion.
So we don't really know if there were some Laverne constituents that came to the meeting.
Right,
It's not been
exactly.
talked to-
So
it's not
that's
been
what I'm
spoken
saying,
about.
that we don't know who was at the meeting to see these concerns either. So that was when, doesn't matter whether it falls or fall break. If this is a priority, you make it to where you show up. It doesn't matter where it happened, Christmas break or, it doesn't matter. If it's a priority, you show up and you make it happen.
Okay. Well, it's all right with everyone. I'll move on to 13.
Can I ask, Madam Chair, one question about that? There was some discussion about who owned this property. You know, the one group said, no, we own it, another group said, no, you don't, we do. Was that ever clarified, or does it make any difference?
I defer to Mr. Reed.
Yeah, I do too.
Title of that property is in the name of the county. With the school being on the property, the possession of the property is, by statute, is with the Board of Education.
Thank you.
If there's no more questions, I'll go on to the resolution. So we have, there's 2 resolutions related to ESL students that's will be before the board on Thursday. The first of these is one to request the legislature increase Title III funds for ESL services. This resolution says multiple counties in Tennessee are experiencing a substantial influx of students for whom English is not their native language. And whereas many of these students are not fluent in reading or speaking the English language, and whereas, for example, Rutherford County has experienced a significant surge in its English learner population with an increase of over 140%, in the past decade. And whereas in May of 2023, Rutherford County Schools had 6,214 ESL students, and by the end of the 2023-24 school year, that number had reached 6,912. As the current school year, the 2024 through 2025 school year, Rutherford County Schools has 8,220 ESL students. And whereas this growth necessitated an additional 25 positions at the start of the school year for the English as a second language program, and whereas as demand continued to rise, Rutherford County Schools added 19 more growth positions for ESL, primarily funded through local and state revenue due to limited Title III funds, and whereas additional instructional personnel is vital to meet the needs of EL students, but federal funding is limited for the same, now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Education that the Board of Education urges legislators to provide an increase in Title III funding at a rate of $3,500 per student for ESL services to counties experiencing a high growth of ESL students and for those counties which already have high numbers of ESL students. So that's the first resolution that we'll be considering on Thursday. There is a second resolution pertaining to translators, and this one says, whereas Rutherford County has experienced a significant surge in its English learner population with an increase of over 140% in the past decade, and whereas multiple other counties in Tennessee have experienced a substantial growth in the number of students for whom English is not their native language, and whereas in May 2023, Rutherford County Schools had 6,214 ESL students, by the end of the 2023-24 school year, that number had reached 6,912, and as the current year, that number is 8,220 ESL students. And whereas this growth has created a substantial need for translation services, not only to support students, but also to engage parents, many of whom face language and literacy barriers. And whereas translation services are critical to ensuring equitable access to education for EL students and their families, and whereas translators are critically needed at times of essential communication between school systems and parents, such as enrollment, parent-teacher conferences, and other student-related concerns, now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Education that the Rutherford County Board of Education respectfully requests state funding for school systems to fund the hiring of translators for school systems at a ratio of 1 ESL EA bilingual for every 70 ESL students. That's a 70-to-1 ratio at a starting rate of $17 per hour. And that's the second resolution that will be on the agenda for Thursday.
Yes, Mr. Sullivan.
So one, just because I got our official ESL number yesterday that will be funded on for next school year, if we can update that 8,220 to 8,373.
Oh, wow.
So that is the number we will be funded on next year for TISA. Just while it was top of mind, I thought let's go ahead and make it for what the state is reporting.
Very good.
Ms. Maxwell?
Yes.
So,
Dallas.
thank you. So this resolution about the ESL translators, so basically how this came out is because it all started, I've been in conversations with Megan and Dr. Shastine and Dr. Goulian, and we were been talking about things that we can request or make changes to better enhance and provide services for this particular population, since we're seeing a massive growth year over year, as you can tell in the numbers. And so one of the requests on Megan is to provide translators. There will be ESL EAs, they're bilingual. And so I proposed this idea to, I forgot his name, Nathan out of the Department of Education, and he said that this will be something that we could potentially submit and present to our legislators, and hopefully create a bill that it can be passed through that will give us funding from the state side so that we can adequately serve our students by having translators that can help with the language barrier. And then the Title III funds and asking for a little bit more money for that is because we are seeing a huge growth in this population. And like, I want to reiterate that Dr. Sullivan said that these students are requiring services. Services mean that they're requiring funding, that needing appropriate staffing, and other things as well. And the Title III funds that we're getting from the federal side is a minuscule of the amount of money that we actually need. I mean, I think it's about $1.3 million that we're getting in the Title III funds. Yeah, and that's just literally, that's just the sliver of it. When you look at what all that is involved in trying to adequately serve these kids. And so this is a conversation that I've had with Megan, and what is the potential of money, that additional funding that we will need, and that's where the money came and landed at in serving this population for. So that's how it all happened, just giving some context about it.
Thank you, sir.
I've got one. Now that I'm reading the resolution closely, 1 to 70 is basically one translator ESL EA for every 2 teachers. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we came out at a ratio with Megan. I consulted with Megan about that and what the ratio could be, and so that's where we landed at, yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms.
Dr. Sullivan, can you go over what the pay is for our different level of EAs right now?
Hopefully on Thursday, because I can't access the, my hotspot is now out of
juice?
yes, which is frustrating.
If you can bring that Thursday, that would be great.
No problem.
Ms. Rosales, are you wanting these positions in addition to the ESL EAs that are already in the system? And are they going to serve just specifically as translators?
Not necessarily as translator, they will be in EA. So the function will be still part of whatever the EA is, but they will serve, if there's a need for translators, that's where they're there.
They would be required to be
They would
bilingual.
be required to be there, yes. But their responsibilities don't change. It's just that when there's a need arise to translate and serve as a go-between, as a point person, that is part of their responsibility.
So you're really just asking for additional ESL EAs, but requiring them to be bilingual? Okay.
Yeah, in a nutshell, that's a great summary.
And we do that already. If they're an ESL EA, they have to be bilingual. We don't necessitate the language they're bilingual, but they have to be able to speak too.
Any other questions?
And that's how Megan worded it, because I asked her, how do we word them as translators and how will they be coded? And she would say they will be coded at ESL EA.
James is
Evans
bringing
to the
me the,
rescue.
James has hotspot Wi-Fi still. Thank you. So for ESL EAs are different levels, are starting at 1643,
And what are our SPED EAs at?
1726.
And I know we have just the basic EAs. Wasn't there another?
Yeah, our behavior EAs are at 1812.
1812. Okay, thank you.
Ready to move on? Okay, number 14, engineering construction.
Central magnet window replacement request. Dr. John Ash is requesting to replace 7 windows in the gym. The windows will be replaced by Hamilton Glass and paid for by an anonymous donor. Cost for the work is $38,880 and will be no cost to the board. Engineering Construction has reviewed this request and has no objection. Greatly appreciate the anonymous donor, and they refuse to be noticed. So
Very nice, very nice.
The seals are broken on those.
they're just older. Yeah.
They were terrible years ago. They're getting better.
It'd be nice if they were stained glass. Be pretty. Number 2, Walter Hill.
Principal Laura Heath is requesting to install 2 wooden poles in the playground area. The poles will be provided by and installed by MTEMC. Once installed, Technology Department will assist with camera installation. The request is at no cost to the board. Engineering Construction has reviewed the request and has no objection.
Number 15,
Special education, under supervision of the special education coordinator or special education pre-K compliance coach, is requested to serve as a liaison between the Tennessee Department of Education Early Childhood and Rutherford County Schools. The position will be funded through the state special education pre-K grant.
number 16, Director's Update.
How will Thursday?
I do have one question. Mr. Reed, could you give us an update on the property that we were waited with bated breath for?
Yeah, I spoke with one of the family members who's the principal is involved with the matter yesterday. He has signed one of the agreements the family has to work out between themselves to get in a position to be sold. So, and they got a few other documents to exchange, but they expect that to be done in the next few weeks. So that all looks like that's progressing according to plan. So we should hopefully be in a position to be able to negotiate something here beginning of January at some point.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir.
Oh, good.
Anybody else have anything for general discussion?
I've got,
Yes, Mr. Vaughn?
I don't know how to do this, but I sure would like to survey the students that want to go to these charter schools that have gone or that we have control of. If we could survey them and find out what was it that made you want to leave the regular schools. I mean, to me, that's one thing. It would help us, I think, make our schools better if we knew why people were wanting to leave. I don't know why they would, but I mean, I'd like to know so maybe we could increase, help improve things a little bit.
So in the exit survey?
Mr. Vaughn?
That's what I was going to say. You're talking about like an exit survey, right, Butch?
Right.
Probably go really maybe to the parents.
Yeah, because we can't survey students without parent permission.
Well, that's what I was fixing to say. I mean, I think it's a great idea, but would we be overstepping our bounds? Because I've always said that, what is the attraction? What is public education not doing?
Right.
That would make somebody want to look at an alternative. I know from a religious standpoint, if it's a religious school, but some of this other education opportunities, I wished I knew.
Me too.
Is there anything wrong with that? I mean, you probably wouldn't get a 1 or 2%.
Let me reach out to TOS and TSBA both and see if anybody else has done that or have any guidance.
Let's do that.
I mean, we could send the survey to the parents, and that way it wouldn't matter. The kids wouldn't come into play on that.
I would want to include it for all withdrawals, not just, and then we could break it down for why.
If we can, we could get that, identify who those people are, and I'd really like to know. I think it would help us all to just.
The only thing I could think of off the top of my head is, these schools are small. And if you don't want your kid in a larger school, you want them in a small environment, I can see why that might be attractive to some people. Yes, Dr. Sullivan.
I'd also like to just look at to get some logistical suggestions, because we would look at about 6,000 surveys that would go out, because it would be the migration out of everyone, not just our charter schools. So let me talk to TOS, TSBA, and think about the logistics behind that as well. Not against it, just I need to think through that.
We would need to pin it.
I always like to do that. I'd just like to know, if you know what the problem is, you can fix it, maybe so.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to bring up something for the board to consider that I don't know if we need to vote on it or not for Thursday, but I had talked to Ms. Maxwell about our first board meeting in January. We're supposed to have the final draft of the contractor's new contract, and wanted to look at, when we close that work session, opening another public meeting to allow our contractors to come talk about, ask questions, and to hear from them.
You're talking about bus.
For the bus contractors after that work session on Tuesday. So it wouldn't incur any additional cost, no additional driving to central office, would give the contractors time to get here after they're done with their routes so that they can come discuss any thoughts or feelings they have on the contract.
I don't have an issue with it. What do you all think?
That's great.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you.
I think that'd go a long way.
Do they have a representative?
There's a loosely joined group of about 70 that has an attorney that has been in conversation with Mr. Reed. The rest are individual contractors, and some of them have reached out to us with questions and recommendations, and we will answer any and all.
Perfect.
Ms. Maxwell? Tralee, when is the bid for the contracts for those 10 bus routes? When is that happening? I know I sat in the pre-bidding meeting, but I know you gave the date, but when is that again? Can you refresh my memory?
It was supposed to be the 4th,
The 4th.
but due to the number of questions, we moved it to the 11th.
The 11th, okay.
But with our current situation, we felt it unfair, so we've moved it to the 18th.
The 18th. So it's going to be January 18th at 10 o'clock?
2.
2, okay.
December 18th.
I mean, December 18th. Sorry.
December 18th at 2.
And is it going to be at the same place?
Be right here.
Right here?
Yes,
Oh,
ma'am.
okay.
Anything else? We are adjourned.